I'm Rachel Ann Goodman. Welcome to a conversation with City Council candidates. And today I'm talking with Sandy Brown, who is running for Santa Cruz City Council. Thank you for being here, Sandy.
Thank you for being here to talk with me.
You're welcome. It's my pleasure. I think the public really needs to know who's running and what their issues are. And with so many candidates, it's often hard to get to know them. So I'm so glad you've given us the time today. Let's just start out with a typical job interview question of, what's your background and why do you want to run for City Council?
Sure. It's a great question. Those are great questions to get to know me. Besides having lived in Santa Cruz and cared about Santa Cruz city politics and been really involved over the years for about 25 years now, I want to see Santa Cruz move forward in a sustainable and equitable way. And I want to see a city council that cares about those issues. Of course, that sounds like a very abstract and vague set of terms, right? So, who isn't for those things? But for so long, I've seen the devil in the details kind of challenges. So when we get to questions about what are the specific issues that we can deal with on a city council and how we deal with them and for whom, there are often very serious differences of opinion amongst people who have the same values. So I really want to be a candidate and a council member who can work in a collaborative way, but also provide leadership on some of those issues. And in terms of my background, I think that my experience and skills lend themselves towards doing that work. I have a long list of careers, I guess, and I'm still trying to figure out what I'm going to be when I grow up. But I've worked in nonprofit program development, legislative advocacy, community and labor organizing, and most recently as a researcher and a professor. I've also spent a lot of time working in sustainable agriculture as a practitioner and as a researcher on labor rights in agriculture.
So you really are tuned in a lot with what workers struggle with in Santa Cruz. And
absolutely.
It's certainly a big topic, the economy, and that's one I wanted to start with, so it's a good segue. It's hard to make a living here. In fact, I was shocked to read that 21% of children are living below the poverty line in Santa Cruz County. And I don't know what the city statistics are, but they may be similar. And $14.16 an hour for a single person is what they call sustainable wage, meaning you can eat and maybe get rent, but not much else. So what do we do? I know the city council can only do so much to stimulate the economy. It's getting better, but what kinds of things could a city council and what would you do to promote that kind of economic growth that would bring jobs that are at least a living wage and hopefully above?
Sure. I think that there's a lot of questions that are kind of interconnected there. So it's not just stimulating the economy, but housing, and I'm sure you'll ask me about that as well. But in terms of stimulating economic growth, I think that the key is, the city can only do so much, right? We're constrained by the kind of vagaries of the global economy, the national economy, the state, the regional economy. And so, but I think there are some things the city can do, and I think they're directly tied to the kinds of economic development that we invite into the city and the kinds of community benefits. For example, community benefits agreements that we might be able to establish with, in particular in mixed use development that's coming our way along the corridors, as far as I can tell, having read the corridor plan, requiring that businesses pay at least a minimum of the living wage. And I worked on the living wage campaign here in the city, so I understand how difficult it is for some small businesses. But if we're going to promote economic development, it should be good jobs, good wages, and I think there are ways that the city can do that.
So the big sectors here, obviously, education. The university supplies some really good paying jobs and benefits. And then there's tourism, which is so-so because of all the hospitality industry, as well as eating out. So there's all of those itinerant jobs that aren't always very well paid. And then there's the tech sector. So of those three, what are some things that could be done to make those healthier and able to pay better wages?
Oh, that's a really good question. Well, I think those sectors are actually a lot healthier than the decision makers who are determining, or at least participating in determining, what the wages and benefits for those jobs are. And so I think there are ways to work as a city to help employers understand that this is a priority. And there's, again, only so much we can do. We as a charter city, we could raise the minimum wage. The state is doing that at the moment, so that'll help. But I think, trying to open up those conversations and help employers understand that they are operating in a city that makes that a priority would, at a minimum, begin to get us further down that road.
And so the tech sector, we're so close to Silicon Valley that it's just tempting, because of the big companies over there and the startups, for people to commute. 30% of our population goes over the hill from Santa Cruz County every day, and we can see the traffic problems that creates, as well as quality of life for those people. They spend a lot of time on the road. I'm sure anybody watching this will go, yeah. How can we keep them over here? What could the city do to make it more attractive, perhaps? Is it providing more office space that's affordable? What could the city do as far as making it more hospitable to tech firms to stay over here or innovate here and start here?
Sure. Well, I think the city actually has been doing a pretty good job, again, given the constraints of being a very small city with limited land and, in particular, land zoned for those purposes. But at the same time, I think that there are ways that the city could work within the kind of I would say, not even necessarily just the city itself. I don't think there's much the city can do, much more than it's done, but working regionally with other local jurisdictions so that people can at least be within, the county or this region, instead of having to commute over the hill. Or
and
San Francisco, where I went for 2 years.
A lot of driving. Yeah, anytime you're stuck, and I'm sure stuck in traffic is a common occurrence. As you know, they're cutting metro services due to budget shortfalls, and the 17 bus will be one of those, as well as other services. Some of the universities, Cabrillo and UCSC, have tried to defray those by upping student fees. That helps a little bit, but $4 million? Big shortfall.
It's $8.8 million. Yeah.
Is there anything that could be done, maybe in the longer term future, to resurrect this bus system, which is so good, and we're in danger of defraying it so much and reducing it that no one uses it, and then hence its further demise? So how do you reverse that?
Sure. So again, and I don't want to just lean back on there's only so much the city can do arguments for
It is a countywide
response.
system.
It's a countywide system. Mm-hmm. It's reliant on revenue streams from a variety of sources, and the city is only one small part of that. And so, but I think the city can provide leadership on the Metro Transit Board to try to ensure that, given we know the cuts are coming, there's nothing we can do about it, it's at least at the moment, but that the city can actually use advocate for social equity in terms of how those cuts are distributed.
Yeah.
Thank you, that's the word, distributed, rather than just ridership. Reading the plans that the Metro Transit District has put out, it's about markets and ridership, and not about who really needs the bus service, when we know that 80% of the people who use the bus system don't have cars.
Yeah, and we don't want to put more cars on the road.
So I think the city has a role to play. I think it's going to be a difficult few years at a minimum.
So we're going to dive into the other big issue. Not that we solved all the transit problems. We're going to dive into housing affordability, and rentals and ownership are not so disconnected. So we have the problem of just too many people needing to rent at an affordable rate than there are available rentals, and pressure upwards on rents as well as pressure upwards on housing costs for buying, and they're connected. So starting with the rental market, what are some things maybe the city hasn't looked at that you might have thought of that would be interesting ideas? And maybe let's start with accessory dwelling units. Are we doing everything we can to make those affordable for homeowners to put on the market? Or is it just too steep of a cost?
Sure. Okay, so I want to talk about the affordable housing question in kind of three arenas. And one of them is the ADU question, so I'll start there. The second one is kind of the infill mixed-use density question, and then some other issues about current rents and the drive up of those current rents. I mean, we're living on some of the highest value land in the country, right? So, and we live in a market-based society, so there's only so much we can do. Again, I don't mean to keep falling back on that. But in terms, so ADUs, I mean, I think there's a place for, mitigating or relaxing restrictions on ADUs in order to make it more affordable. It's too costly for most people at least in my anecdotal world. I'm a social scientist, so
I think the Chamber of Commerce came out with an opinion piece that said it was even too steep for most homeowners.
Yeah, I mean, it is.
50 to 100,000 to get a unit online.
Yep.
That's a lot of money for most people.
Yeah.
And it would take years to recoup that in rents.
And especially when it's really becoming increasingly difficult to take out a second mortgage or a loan, whatever it might be needed to do that. So, I think relaxing restrictions will get us somewhere. At the same time, it's still, in the 25 years I've lived here, there are a lot of ADUs out there that aren't on the books. They're undocumented ADUs that people might put on the books should the restrictions be relaxed, but that's not going to get us new housing, additional housing. And so we could probably get some units out of that, but I don't think it's going to, nothing's going to solve our housing crisis that we're experiencing. But I would definitely support it. I think it's an important piece of the puzzle.
How about asking the university to pick up a greater share than they already do of housing their students?
Well, that's a very good question. I would support that. The challenge is that, as far as I can tell, most city residents don't really support. Again, this is anecdotal evidence, providing more water and infrastructure for UCSC growth. Even though we know the university is going to grow, we're going to have 2,000 more students in the next couple of years. And I think that the university should be housing more students. They will say, or the state of California will say, we need water and permitting for infrastructure to be able to do that. So it's sort of there's a little bit of a challenge there. Should the city give the university more water and other stuff so they can bring in more students, or not, or assume that the university will find other ways to move, keep students within the UC system and maybe not expand as much? I don't think that's going to happen. So yes,
it's a conundrum, isn't it?
Yes, it's a total conundrum, and I think
everything's connected, is what you're saying.
Everything's connected, and I think
Water,
the university should make a commitment to housing more of its students.
Yeah, and again, the city can't tell the university what to do. It's the regents who make those decisions, but they do have an agreement about the water, which we will get to talking about the water board, because that's a huge one.
Or not add students until
certain things are solved. Yeah. So other affordable housing ideas that you wanted to talk about?
Sure. So, I know there's a lot of debate about increased density, especially along the corridors, the corridor plan, and just increased density infill development in general. I'm not, I think there's a place for that. I do. But I think there are ways that the city could actually play a role in ensuring that if and when that happens, and I probably should just say when, because we see it coming, that the city could, for example, demand increased community benefits. So inclusionary housing built on site rather than paid into a housing trust fund, which doesn't get much housing built, as we know, we've seen over the past 20 years. I don't know the exact number of units, but it's pretty limited because it's a lot of money to build those units. So inclusionary housing on site, perhaps increasing the inclusionary housing requirements. The city's done a better job than the state on that, but we could do better. And third, lowering or increasing the allotment of low-income units within the mix, so that.
So affordable and low income are not the same thing. They're two different
Well,
categories.
it's called affordable. We call it affordable housing, but it's complicated. But moderate, low income, and very low income is based on the Santa Cruz County median income, and which is $63,000 a year for a family of 4. So very low income housing, $50,000 is you can meet the requirement. So and that's a whole nother question of what's actually affordable. But I think targeting more of those units to a lower percentage would be something that we could do. And I don't think that, the idea that developers just won't build anything here if we make the requirements more stringent is just not the case.
People really want to live here, so they'll come anyway.
People really want to live here.
Yeah.
And again, some of the most valuable land, high value land in the country. So
Yeah.
I think we have some possibility there.
So not so far from the housing issue is the homelessness issue. I mean, on
Sure.
the very low end, you can't afford anything, right? So, and I was shocked to read that 26% of homeless people have jobs. 26%, so they can't afford a place to live. And they still go to work every day from wherever they're staying, might be a couch. We tend to think the homeless live only under bushes or, outside because we see them, but actually there's quite a lot of people living on people's couches or in RVs and places like that in their cars. So what can be done that isn't already being done by the city of Santa Cruz? What kinds of compassionate and wise things could they do that would get at this problem? I heard somewhere between 600 to 1,000 people are homeless on a given night here. So that's a lot of people to find places for. Not all of them want to go to shelters.
Not all of them can go to shelters because of the way the shelter system is set up, and that's a level of detail I probably can't get into here today. But having worked for the California Homeless and Housing Coalition, the Community Action Board, which houses the homeless shelter project, I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, and it's a really difficult issue. There are a lot of people who are genuinely in crisis and or just not able to afford the rents to live here, but for whatever reason either need to stay. I mean, I hear people saying all the time that they're just going to leave because otherwise they're going to keep couch surfing, and they can't afford to live here. So that is a segment of the population, and I think that the affordable housing, more affordable housing is going to help ease that pressure, or could. But when it comes to kind of the bigger questions around, what services for the home, we've cut our services down to the bone in Santa Cruz City and County, and I know the city maintains a commitment to some of these programs, but they're very, very limited at this point, right? I mean, the day center's hours have been cut. I mean, even the day center, the Armory has, how many nights of the year is it open anymore, right? And so I think the city needs to make a commitment financially and in terms of taking leadership regionally on that.
So it sounds like you might be taking a position about wanting to increase funding for homeless services.
Yeah, and I think, I won't go into the details. If people want to talk more with me about it, I'm happy to, but I think Don Lane's proposal about some increase in funding, some additional collaboration with the county, some possibility of a place where people could park RVs without being ticketed. I mean, we're spending so much money on enforcement, and the police. I mean, even the chief of police said last week at the city council budget hearings, this is, we're under-resourced and it's not effective.
Which gets me to a question about law enforcement, and it's a good segue, the RV issue, and what else they could be spending their time on. So I was just driving by El Camino Real by Stanford, and there were hundreds of RVs, and I thought this can't be a camp out this must be a place they're allowed to park those RVs. Next to Stanford, of all places. So what do you think about the up-ticketing and moving along into different neighborhoods of the RVs? That seems like it's not working.
No, I think that it's not, and it's making people in the neighborhoods feel like they're being invaded. And however I feel about that, it's clearly not working, right? So people need a place to go, because where are they going to go if they're, and being pushed into the neighborhoods or into places where they feel like they're not going to be seen is not helping. And if there could be some kind of regulated, safe space, I think it would be, again, it's not going to solve the problem, or the crisis, but it's going to help.
Permit system.
A permit
Something.
system, exactly.
You get a permit, you get to be there for 10 days or whatever.
Yep.
Okay, well, I've been given the 5-minute signal, so we're going to
Uh-oh,
whip
okay.
through these
Okay,
important
now it's
questions.
the yes, no.
Well, not quite, but you can answer them as many as we can get to. So what else would police, should they focus on if not, putting homeless people and giving them tickets for sleeping and so forth? What else are the priorities you think that the police in Santa Cruz could and should be focusing on?
Yeah, well, that's another very good question. I mean, I'm a big fan of community policing when it's operationalized in ways that actually entail providing support to communities, right? So, for example, somebody in the library who can provide support and resources for, parents in crisis who come in to pick up their kids who are at the library after school, and, those kinds of community support services. Talking with people in the neighborhoods, helping people kind of get through crisis rather than just feeling like they're being surveilled and policed.
Would
right?
you have voted for the Bearcat if you had been on the city council?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Let's see, downtown Santa Cruz gets a lot of attention. Are there one or two things you would like to see happen down there that aren't happening that would make life even cheerier down there for people coming?
Well, it's interesting. As a downtown resident, I have to say I've learned a lot about, I'm a more recent downtown resident. I lived on the west side for a long time. I've learned a lot about traffic flow patterns, and not just car traffic, but people traffic in the evenings when people are going to the bars and coming out of the bars, for example. And I'm all for people having a good time, but there does seem to be a lot of, noise and kind of disturbances that the police end up having to deal with. I mean, there must be a way. I don't know exactly. I can't say I know what that is, but there must be a way to try to mitigate that before, it comes to a head. And people are breaking bottles and
We don't want
having
it to
a
be
fight
Bourbon
outside my
Street.
house. Yeah.
It's still a neighborhood, that's what you're
It's
saying.
still a neighborhood,
Yeah.
but but I think that the downtown neighbors are overall concerned with kind of traffic, parking, all the
usual
standard
things.
stuff, and we love our downtown. We love the convenience of being there. We love it that people come there, and we'd love to see it be a place where everybody can feel comfortable.
Well, in 30 seconds or less, since we are running out of time.
Sure.
What qualities do you think it takes for someone to work collectively with a council as a member?
What qualities? Well, I think
Personality qualities, for example.
the ability to listen to people, to everyone, even if you don't agree. The ability to articulate your own principles without being too aggressive, and the ability to just work with people collaboratively.
Sounds great. Well, I wish you all the best. Thank you for spending the time to
Thank
talk to me,
you. I
Sandy
can't
Brown.
believe it went so fast.
I
We didn't even
know.
get to talk about water.
Oh, we'll have to save it for another time.
Another time.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching.